guys, Ray from Whimsical Pictures here, hastily trying to put this video together before the sun sets completely, so wish me luck on that. This video is in response to Laura over at the Manga Hoarder. She just put up a great video of historical manga recommendations for her Manga Monday series. And that has some fantastic recommendations in it as well, so make sure to check that one out too. I'll put the link in the description below. But she invited other people to participate in her Manga Monday entries, so I decided to do that today because while at first thought I'm not that big into historical fiction, but then once I actually started thinking about it, I started thinking of all of the historical manga I love, and I couldn't stop thinking of them. So I put together a list of 5 titles that are unfortunately, tragically, unlicensed in English, as well as 5 titles that are licensed in English. So we'll do the unlicensed first, and then the licensed, and let's go! The first unlicensed title is also easily the most obvious choice. The biggest elephant in the room, definitely. Udon Entertainment. And that is, of course, Berusayu no Bara, The Rose of Versailles, one of the most famous and beloved manga series of all time. This is by Ryoko Ikeda, and it was originally published in the 1970s. This is the story of the dashing and valiant Lady Oscar, a cross-dressing member of the French army in 18th century France. And it follows her in her various entanglements and political machinations she gets caught up in, and of course she eventually gets caught up in the French Revolution. This story is huge and sprawling and epic. It spans decades, and it has absolutely everything you could possibly want in a story. Apart from being stunningly beautiful on every single page, this has romance, it has drama, it has politics and swashbuckling and war and revolution and guillotines, and one of the greatest heroines of all time. We desperately need it in English, and I really hope Udon gets their stuff together. In the meantime, though, at the end of the month, the 26th, I believe, you will be able to check out at least one thing from this author, Ryoko Ikeda. Seven Seas, bless them. They've become my favorite publisher, shockingly, in the last couple of years. They will be releasing the one-shot volume Claudine, which was also published in the 70s. This is an early LGBTQ manga about a trans man named Claudine and his various romantic entanglements. I have heard the treatment of LGBT issues is a little dated, but apart from that, I've heard that it's fantastic and beautiful and well worth the read, so let's look forward to that together. Number 2 on my list is one that I just started reading, so I'm not that far in it yet, but I'm loving it so far. This is another quite famous title from the 70s. This is Haikara-san ga Toru, or Here Comes Miss Modern, is a title that I sometimes hear this translated as, and I think it works quite well. Haikara's a bit weird to translate, but that works. This series is set in the Taisho era, which is the era from 1912 to 1926, sort of sandwiched between the Meiji era and the Showa era. It's in between wars, and it is an economic boom time for Japan. This period, though short, is really heavily romanticized these days. And it's just a really, aesthetic period with, these girls with the big bows and, hakama pants And, you know, maybe she's standing next to her friend who's wearing, like, the Western-style dress and a cloche. And they're riding bicycles, and it's just, like, hashtag aesthetic all around. It's very much sort of fairy tale-like, the way that it's portrayed, and I'm, like, 800% here for that. I love the Taisho era, and all you have to do to make me love your book, actually, is to set it in the Taisho era. And here we are! This is the story of this girl here, who is sort of a strong-willed, independent, you know, tomboy, feminist, who wears these crazy Western dresses and talks back to her parents and wants to marry for love. And her parents aren't too into that, so they, unbeknownst to her, betroth her to this handsome military man here. And once she finds out about this, of course, she's not particularly thrilled. And it's just sort of about their, sort of on-again, off-again, hate-to-love kind of relationship, as well as just her sort of living her life and dealing with her family and hanging out with her friends who are, for the most part, like, equally forward-thinking and independent. And it's super pretty. So, I highly recommend it. My favorite character is this guy here, named Ranmaru, who was raised to play female roles in kabuki theater, and seems to have taken that profession very much to heart, and is very much in the sort of same vein as Noriko from Fushigi Yugi, in being sort of an older sister figure to the main character. He's also kind of a love interest, but I love him. He's really funny. And cute. The next one I want to recommend is a Year 24 title, because there had to be one, right? It's not Moto Hagio, but close enough, honestly. It's Keiko Takemiya's Kaze Toki no Uta. Again, sprawling. This is 17 volumes long. It's the story of sort of budding love and coming of age of two boys in a French boarding school. The time period's a bit nebulous, but I also feel like this story would not be what it is without being set in sort of this almost othered, like, fairy tale-esque Japanese author's version of Europe. I don't know. But this story is stunning. Like, on paper, it seems so small, just the story of this sort of budding romance between these two boys, but when you read it, it feels so huge and universal, and even though it deals with some pretty dark content, and content warning for pretty much everything under the sun, by the way, but even despite that, it feels so hopeful. And it's just a beautiful story about love and redemption and becoming a better person through falling in love with another person. And I love it. And you should read it. The next one is from Marimo Nagawa, who I believe did Baby and Me. For some reason I always mix that one up with Aishiteru Ze Baby, but I'm pretty sure Baby and Me is Nagawa, so yell at me in the comments if I'm wrong. But, anyway, this is the work she did before that. It's 4 volumes long, it's called New York, New York, and it is also BL, but it doesn't really feel like it. In any case, its aims are a bit more literary than a lot of its peers. This takes place in 1980s New York, and it follows a policeman, I forget his name, but he's sort of very deep in the closet. He's terrified of what will happen to his life if he comes out, or if he's caught with another man. So he's hiding the fact that he's gay from his coworkers and family. But he ends up sort of falling in love at first sight with this guy named Mel, who he meets through various circumstances, and they end up going out, first secretly and then not so secretly. And the one half of the story is, you know, sort of very entertaining, almost like film noir-esque, like cop drama. And then the other half is dealing very sensitively with gay issues in the 1980s. And if you know about some very big gay-related issues that happened during that time period, you can imagine that things get very dramatic. There's ups and downs. It's an emotional roller coaster. And there's definitely, like, some minor points where it's, like, a little dated and a little, like, I think a straight chick wrote this, but for the most part, it is a very good and sensitive handling and nuanced handling of these issues. It's very informative if you don't personally know a lot about that particular part of gay history. And it's just really solid and entertaining, romantic, with some great cop drama in there as well. So I recommend it. And the last one for unlicensed series is going to be Kids on the Slope, or Sakamichi no Apollon, by Yuki Kodama. You probably have heard of this one through the anime, and I do think the anime is worth watching as well. This one I'm actually not particularly enamored with the story or the characters. They're fine. But what I really like and remember about this series is the setting. It feels like it really creates and throws you into this setting of the 1960s and sort of this Japanese high school in the 1960s, and the music culture and jazz music in that period. You very much feel like you're there in that time and place. And I think that's an important aspect of, like, historical fiction in particular. That's certainly what I like to get out of it a lot of times, so I would recommend that title. Licensed titles. The first one of these is hideously, disgustingly out of print. I'm so sorry. This is probably my favorite Osamu Tezuka title. It was released in 8 big ol' volumes from Vertical a while back. Good luck finding them now, like with a lot of that Vertical stuff. This is Buddha. As the title suggests, it is a sort of fictionalized, not even fictionalized, more like mythologized. It feels very mythological. Like, not in that it feels fake, but in that it feels like a myth. It feels grand and heroic, you know? And it's the mythologized account of Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha. Usually not through his perspective, but through the perspectives of the people, the characters that Tezuka creates around him, who are changed and moved by his presence and his teachings. And it's really good. It taught me a lot about Buddhist thought. It's extremely entertaining. It's full of adventure and every emotion you could think of. Of course, it's beautifully drawn, particularly the landscapes. And it's funny, you know, Osamu Tezuka's got that sense of humor, and he brings it here, too. I highly recommend this one, if you can find it. I don't hear it talked about as much as some other Tezuka titles, and for me, it's definitely a favorite. Number 2, licensed titles. Of course, I had to talk about one of Moyoko Anno's titles. I love her works about sex workers more than any of her other stuff. I love all her stuff, but the way that she writes these women is so much different from what I think I've seen, like, anywhere else. She has such an empathy for these women and their situations. She writes them strong and independent, but still sort of, like, they're not victims, but she still doesn't shy away from the more abusive and exploitative aspects of their workplace. And she just writes them so well. And the one I've decided to go with is available on Crunchyroll Manga. I believe it's still there. It's called Memoirs of Amorous Gentlemen. It is about a French prostitute in 19th century France. And it's just about her and the other women at this brothel just dealing with their lives, you know, dealing with their job and just general boredom. The main character is dealing with this sort of rationalizing her feelings for this shithead guy who she knows he's a shithead, but she doesn't leave anyway, and she's got her reasons for that. And it's just a really good story. It's got some great costumes and some great humor when it comes to the girls sort of just shooting the shit about some of their more eccentric patrons, hence the title. The next one I want to recommend is from Kaoru Mori, who I would consider a master in the field of historical fiction. My personal favorite title from her, Victorian Romance Emma, is great as well, but my favorite from her is A Bride's Story. This takes place in the 19th century along the Silk Road. It explores various different sort of nomadic tribes and cultures along the Silk Road during that time, usually centering around a bride. So the sort of main couple that it keeps returning to is 20-year-old Amir, who has been wed to a 12-year-old boy named Karluk and is sort of just getting used to her new family. And sometimes she has to deal with issues from her old family. And it just... Mori does such a good job of just, like, putting you, again, just placing you in that time and that place and making you feel like you're there. Her stories are very gentle, very slice of life. There's not a whole lot of drama going on here. Every once in a while something dramatic happens, but it's usually gone after a couple chapters. And we're back to, like, watching one of the younger sisters learn how to embroider, you know? But there's so many little, like, artistic and cultural details. You can really tell that Mori cares about the people she's portraying and the cultures she's portraying. And it's just really good. Next, Ooku, The Inner Chamber. This has sort of a speculative sci-fi twist to it, in that sort of in Edo, Japan, in this version, a plague has wiped out 75% of the male population. I am so sorry. And now women have sort of come to fill the leadership roles in society. while men are sort of a delicate, protected class. And it mostly takes place within the inner chambers of the shogun's harem, which in this world, the shogun is now a woman, and her harem is full of men. But, that being said, that twist aside, this is probably my favorite go-to manga in terms of the Edo era and the history of the Tokugawa shogunate and samurai and all that. Even though the shoguns here are female and they're sort of fictional female shoguns, they are heavily based on real-world counterparts. And it's just full of everything that I like in historical fiction, which is a lot of political intrigue and a lot of drama. And the last title that I want to talk about is a semi-autobiographical account of World War II that I always see my kids reading in schools, and I'm glad that they haven't taken it out of my schools. But this is Barefoot Gen. This one is also hideously out of print. I think it's getting a new version though, or it got one. This is a harrowing, disturbing, really hard to read account of the bombing in Hiroshima and the aftermath there. It follows Gen, who is sort of a fictionalized version of the mangaka who was a child at the time of the bomb. And it follows Gen as he loses most of his family in the bomb, and goes on to sort of survive with his mother and a little boy that they take in. And this is not a pretty or romantic account of this event. The scene of the bombing in particular is full of images that are not easily forgotten, and it's just heartbreaking knowing that these images were drawn from a real person's own memory of people wandering around screaming as their skin literally melts off their bodies. There's this image that I'll never forget of a man who's just wandering around shouting for food with his intestines just hanging out of his body. It's really hard to read. And then I appreciate how the series doesn't let anybody off the hook. Obviously it doesn't treat the American soldiers particularly kindly, and it also doesn't take a very kind eye to the Japanese soldiers either, while at the same time really sympathizing with the survivors and following their struggles to just get back to life as normal and still remember, you know, who and what they've lost. It's a fantastic message of pacifism and an end to nuclear weaponry. And I say it's so dark and harrowing, and obviously it has this really grotesque, horrible imagery and events, but Gen's own, like, just relentless spirit and, like, gung-ho attitude and the way he just keeps moving forward makes it a lot easier, and almost gives it this message of hope for the future that I really appreciate, and I just think the work overall is extremely powerful. And if you're gonna read any World War II manga, this is the one that I personally would recommend. And those are my recommendations for historical manga. There's a lot of others that I had to take off of this list to leave us with 10, but hopefully you enjoyed the ones here. You can tell me all about any that I've missed down in the comments below, or make your own video. The call is totally open as per the Manga Hoarder's rules, so I look forward to seeing your own recommendations, your thoughts about these titles, etc., etc., and I will talk to you next time, guys. Bye!